I'm Len Goodman. I am a philosopher. I have an appointment at Vanderbilt University where I've taught for the past 20 years, and for 25 years before that, I taught philosophy at the University of Hawaii in Honolulu. Uh, I'm very interested in Jewish philosophy and in Islamic philosophy, and sometimes I tell people that in Islamic philosophy, I'm an interpreter. In Jewish philosophy, I'm an interpreter also, but also a player. First of all, I would say that the worry that science and religion are in competition with each other is a misplaced fear. Uh, it could be an excuse for setting religion aside. People don't like to be told what to do, and religions often do like to try and set values and goals and limits and aspirations for us. Uh, but if one studies science and studies science carefully and studies the world as our book, one finds all kinds of evidence of divine action, divine creativity, the beauty of the world, the rationality of the world, the intelligibility of the world. These are the things that scientists look at. They're better at looking at the intelligibility than they are at the beauty. They see it, but they don't have methods by which they can measure it. This is an area where religion might be helpful to science. But the idea that there's an explanatory zero-sum game so that the more science can explain, the less is left for religion to talk about, I think is a misplaced anxiety. As far as the deist idea is concerned, uh, there was a time, and it was, I guess, characteristic of the Industrial Revolution and the origins of the Industrial Revolution when people were thinking of the world as a machine. It was a very natural metaphor for them to use. God sort of wound it up and let it run, or maybe God had to intervene occasionally to oil the parts and repair the mechanism. But we know a lot more about that in science. One of the things we know is that reality is very dynamic. It's almost impossible to cool things down to the point where they're not moving anymore. It's a world which gives rise to life, and life gives rise to intelligence. These are things that look miraculous. Some of the medieval philosophers that I study, who were very committed to the idea that God created the world, thought that that couldn't be proved. Had they known of the evidence for the Big Bang, they would have been terribly excited. Had they known that the evidence for an expanding universe provided the possibility and increasingly confirmed the notion that the world had an origin, they would have thought they were home free because it couldn't have originated itself. I know you've worked on this issue yourself as a serious physicist, and that's something that religious people today should find very inspiring. Certainly, any of the great medieval philosophers who defended the idea of creation would have thought science is on our side. I think that evolution shows the same thing. Science vindicates religious ideas in some very significant ways. Unfortunately, polemicists, both religious fundamentalists and scientific fundamentalists, have jumped on an idea like evolution and come up with the notion that evolution and religion are in conflict with one another. On the contrary, evolution is evidence for the reality of divine action as I see it, because nature doesn't just sit around. It springs to life, and beings aspire and try to persist and to be more than they have been. Similarly with brain science. I think there's a popular illusion around that that the more we know about the brain, the less able we are to talk about human persons as something other than the bodies in which the self originates. I think, on the contrary, if one reads the literature, the smart money in brain science, and I'm thinking of people like Evan Thompson and many others. They're holistic about the work of the brain. They're looking at the integrative character of the brain. One cannot reduce the self to the organ and the system of organs that makes a self and a person possible. And that's why I have made my effort to make the word soul respectable again, not as something that flits about and floats through walls, but as something that can be creative and thoughtful and aware and perceptive and loving and caring. Brain science is telling us more and more that the integration of body and soul is the way human beings actually come together and work and live their lives.